My name is Vesper. I'm going to be your host tonight. We have some wonderful panelists here today to contribute to our conversation on preparing for integrating your Burning Man experience. Um, we're operating this evening in this conversation from a place of using psychedelic assisted therapy as an analogy for Burning Man. So, in psychedelic assisted therapy, participants prepare for their altered experience similarly to how we can prepare ourselves for the mental, emotional, and spiritual experience of going to Burning Man. This campfire talk is not about endorsing the use of psychedelic drugs at Burning Man or elsewhere. Um, you do you, but psychedelic experiences happen at Burning Man. You can also have a transformative experience without any substances at all. And we'll be considering this model of psychedelic assisted therapy as a way of framing the heightened experience that burners may have at Burning Man in Black Rock City. As we know, Burning Man can very similarly to a heightened altered experience stimulate the senses, challenge your perceptions, and create opportunities for reflection and growth. Preparing for and processing after the Burning Man experience can help us carry our experiences that we had there into our default lives. Today will be our part one pre-burn session, where we'll talk about preparing for a potentially transformative experience and how to maximize the experience while it's happening. In a few months after the burn, we'll have our part two post-burn session when our panelists and hopefully you as one of our participants will get together to discuss ways to make meaning of what we have experienced just now at Burning Man and how to integrate that into our default world lives. So welcome to our participants tonight. Please continue to use the chat to introduce yourselves and share your camps and put your questions in the chat for as we go through our talk tonight. And I'd like to introduce you to our panel. First up, we have Aya the Riger, Rohini Kanaganti. She is a board-certified family physician serving in hospice and palliative care, and a teacher of psychedelic harm reduction and integration. She is a bridge between the psychedelic and end-of-life spaces, bringing together science and the sacred. She communes through an attuned heart with reverence for the inner movement towards wholeness in all beings, honoring context and community within the healing process. Rohini resides in Boulder, Colorado with her husband, 2 cat children at home, 2 human children in college, nurturing presence, playfulness, creativity, and nature. Hi, Rohini, welcome. I'd also like to welcome Dan Ronkin, licensed therapist and addiction counselor based in Boulder, Colorado, with 15 years of clinical experience. Dan's path into this work is personal. In the late 1990s, he found himself lost and increasingly aware that his use of alcohol and other substances were standing between him and the life he wanted. Recovery was a gradual process, understanding himself more clearly, sustained by emotional honesty, patience, and supportive relationships that could hold him while he did that work. He's been alcohol-free since 2003. Over the years, Dan's view of recovery has expanded. He's come to believe that there is no single right way. People can and do recover on their own terms, making integration, helping people make meaning from what they've been through, the heart of everything he does. Clinically, Dan works at the intersection of traditional therapy and emerging modalities, including ketamine-assisted therapy and psilocybin-assisted therapy under Colorado's Natural Medicine Health Act. When he's not working, he's usually outside, biking, hiking, skiing, or camping. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
I'll introduce you all also to Jacob Purcell. Jacob is a licensed clinical social worker in Las Vegas, whose therapeutic approach blends evidence-based practice with creativity, somatic techniques, mindfulness practices, and whole person care, to recognize the connection between the mind and the body. His clinical focus includes men's mental health, LGBTQIA+ affirming therapy, addiction recovery, grief, anxiety, depression, and supporting individuals through major life transitions. In addition to his clinical work, Jacob has volunteered and worked in mental health care at the intersection of arts, festival, and educational spaces. These experiences have strengthened his belief that healing can happen both inside and outside the therapy office, and have deepened his appreciation for community, creativity, and human connection. Hi, Jacob. Welcome tonight.
Thank you, Vesper.
And Dawn Pinkowski is a registered psychotherapist and the clinical director of Port Credit Therapy Center, which is located close to Toronto, Ontario. She works with adults and couples through a trauma-informed lens, and over the past 3 years, she has trained intensively, assembled a medical team to expand her clinic, and now offers psychedelic-assisted therapy to appropriate clients. In addition to psychotherapy, Dawn practices preparation, intention setting, integration, and breathwork sessions. Dawn has been in private practice since 2005. Her approach is supportive, compassionate, warm, and honest. She offers thoughtful feedback and works collaboratively with clients to help them understand patterns that may be holding them back while supporting new ways forward. Welcome, Dawn. All right, so this is our panel tonight. And to set some framework for our conversation, we'll be dividing this conversation amongst us into 3 parts. The first part being setting, intention, and mindset. Middle part being fully present for the experience as we're having it. And then finally, preparing for aftercare. In each of these sections, I'll prompt our panelists to talk about elements they've found to be important as people prepare for a transformational experience. While our panelists are speaking, please put questions for them into the chat for our Q&A at the end. All right, panelists, let's get into talking about setting, intention, and mindset. Laying the groundwork for an experience can drastically change how that experience goes for us. Radical self-reliance for Burning Man leads us to bring to the desert all the things we need for our basic survival while we're out there. However, we also really need to attend to our mental, emotional, and spiritual needs on the playa. So I wonder if you all might speak to how we can set our intentions and mindset to prepare for going out. Rohini, would you like to start us off? Oh, you're on mute.
I would. Thank you. And thank you for reminding me I'm on mute. I was thinking as you were reading my bio that I'm the comic relief here. I'm the only one of the bunch who hasn't been to Burning Man, and I'm here to help you prepare and then later integrate Burning Man. So just wanted to put that out there. However, what's really been huge and important in my life and consistent in multiple consciousness expanding experiences of my life is, it's interesting as we're talking about mindset, and you said we need to attend to our mental, our emotional, our spiritual needs. Well, what we tend not to say and what we tend to forget is the body. And how we stay grounded in all of the experiences that either create excitement or agitation, right? I'm thinking about even the playa, the sand, the dry desert, the windstorm, right? That's sort of what's happening in our mind. So how do we then slow down and root and ground into our bodies? So this kind of a preparation, we don't have to wait to do it there. We can do it even now, before, during, after, and in the start with the smallest of ways. So attending to the body, for instance, in strange experiences can be practiced here with the smallest stresses that we're encountering. How's my body feeling here? When's the last time I've had something to drink or eat? Have I listened to my need for peeing? Am I dehydrated? Have I slept and rested enough? And I'll stop there. We'll have plenty of opportunity.
Lovely. Thanks. Yeah, Dan.
There's a few things I'd like to touch on. As was mentioned in the introduction, I'm a person in recovery myself, and part of that has been inspired through the 12 steps. And one of the steps in the 12 steps is step 4, and that's make a searching and fearless inventory of ourselves. And so what this can be helpful for as you prepare for Burning Man, it requires an honest, in-depth look at some of your past behaviors, any resentments or fears, or maybe aspects of your character that you'd be interested in learning more about. And maybe in that way impact, or definitely actually impacts, your experience of yourself and interacting with the world. So an example could be, do you have an ongoing resentment toward someone or something that's taking up psychic energy in your life? Maybe that's happening, and there could be some opportunity for forgiveness that would help you out, even if it was justified, right? It's like sometimes, yeah, they're just like unjust things that happen, and it wasn't anything that you did or your fault at all, but still may be taking up a lot of space in your heart and mind. There may be some patterns. What patterns are you living? They may be some more recent behaviors over the past few months, or they may be some lifelong patterns, such as a repeated or a habit of participating in unhealthy relationships. That could be something potentially to explore. And another one is, what are you carrying with you going into the burn? Are there any current life circumstances that are significant? Maybe you're going through a transition. Maybe there's some grief present. Or maybe you've been in a flow state as of late and you're on a roll, right? Just kind of paying attention to these things. And another one around fears. There's enough surprises and novelty at the burn. So if you can take some time to think about what does bring up, what are you mortified about if this happens or this happens? Kind of thinking about, do a dry run in your own system and psyche beforehand, and check in with trusted advisors as you do this. Could be helpful. Or it could be a fear for who you are after the burn if you have a transformative experience. What does that mean to certain relationships? Will someone be upset if you change? Right? As thinking about these things, you don't need to spend too much time thinking about these, but it's just some food for thought. And lastly, when it comes to expectations, yeah, how would you like to manage your expectations or thinking about that? You you can only control your reaction to things, essentially, right? You can't control the external world. You can, what is it, this old phrase, life is 10% what happens to you, 90% how you react to it. So yeah, what do I truly have control over? I mean, sometimes we get triggered something and then we like respond in a way we didn't want to, but that's just a topic for, let's beyond the scope here of this particular part. So regarding your time at the burn, if you are someone who appreciates a schedule, you'd like to be on time. Uh, you know, maybe that could be something to work on. And wherever you are in any given moment in the burn, whoever you're talking to in that moment, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. That could be a good approach as opposed to trying to stick to a schedule at the burn. And then lastly, if with regard to just expectations and sharing your experience afterward. The person who you are sharing the experience with, if they didn't attend, maybe you're super excited and you had this transformative experience. You were just like, oh, mind blown, world changing. And you go in and it falls flat. And then there's blank stares looking back at you. How would that feel? Just like think about that as like, oh, because that could be really painful, like seriously painful and a rupture. So just thinking about those things there, I'll wrap it up. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. And as you all are talking about this, I have a lot of thoughts moving around. So I want to like circle in with Jacob and Dawn, and then I may come back to a couple of points to have us expand on them. Yeah. Yeah. Jacob, you have some questions that you suggest people address getting ready for the burn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to tag on to Dan's point there. A lot of the things that you're saying, Dan, can really be addressed by some self-journaling. Like writing down, having that baseline, writing down these things before you go to the burn. Like, why am I trying to have a transformative experiences? What am I avoiding? And being able to write these things down before, during, and after can really give us a lot of great perspective. And I do want us to identify, like, how do we be fully present during a transformative experience, during the burn, and leaning into this world of possibilities, because there's a difference between leaning into like this possible, like, new change, this like letting go of expectation versus running away from something that's chasing us. Like our experience, on the playa will be much different, if we're constantly thinking about our responsibilities, like back in the default world, like, oh, I was avoiding my taxes, I should have got that done, or I'm like, or like there's these problems inside of like relationships that I have with like what can we do before to prepare in order to not feel like that we're constantly running away, that we're trying to distract ourselves. There is a time and a place where distraction is what we need, and Burning Man's a great place for it. However, if we are trying to like experience some internal growth, asking ourselves, am I running away or attempting to avoid my feelings and my responsibilities? And what do I need to do today or these months preparing for this experience to reduce that level of stress? And I like to use the analogy. I want to invite myself to this experience to be that kid running through a field of grass for the sake of running through a field of grass, and not be that child running away from something that they're scared of, you know. And so I want to lean into that, and having self-regulation practices prepared before we go to the burn. And I like to use the analogy with my patients is like, like, do we practice how to tread water only when we're in the middle of a river? Or do we practice like in a pool in like, controlled environments on a regular basis? So yeah, like meditation, yoga, exercise, like these are all great somatic tools, great preparation tools to calm our nervous system, but are they practice tools? And practicing them can be really, really beneficial to setting that setting.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. And speaking of kind of like what we've been, I think what we've, especially those of us who plan camps and do a lot of the logistics for getting out to Black Rock City, we tend to think about what are we doing in terms of preparation in our lists and our spreadsheets. And all of that is very much in our head. And I'm going to jump in with Dawn, and then I want to circle back to Rohini about like how do we bring ourselves back into the body of this? And one of the aspects of getting in touch with the body part of how are we experiencing what we're experiencing is to be in touch with what do I feel in this particular moment and what are the emotions that might be coming up as I prepare and then while I'm out there. Like, Dawn, talk to us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Love to. Um, I think preparation is a very important part of getting ready for the burn, and that is being prepared for what might be happening internally. There's kind of talked about that maybe Wednesday is the breakdown day. When you're in the burn, you've already been there for a few days. You have been exploring and being stimulated a lot, and often people can have a bit of a crash. So just recognizing that there's going to be excitement, there can be grief. There's so many emotions that can get tapped into just by being there on the playa. I know that when I've gone to the temple, I can be 40, 50 feet away from it, and I can start to feel tears welling up because I can feel so much emotion that is emanating from the structure itself. And if you're not prepared for that, you may be wondering what's going on inside or what it's tapping into. So irritation, anger, there's so much stimulation that's going on there. I know that we found there was sort of a sweet spot in the area that we were camped in around 9:30 to 10 in the morning when it was kind of quiet. But outside of that, very commonly, there's noise all the time. And so just recognizing that you may get irritated, you may have some anger that comes up, feeling like you don't belong. If you're in a camp, if you don't know people all that well, are you somebody that can enter a social space easily, or are you someone who waits for an invitation? Just noticing what might be coming up for you and thinking about it ahead of time is really important. There's also, there can be different sort of drawing on IFS therapy, internal family systems therapy. There's a way that we all have different parts in us that have been created to deal with different dynamics, different relationships. And these different parts of ourselves can get activated when we're there at Burning Man. And so just recognizing, okay, so here's this childlike part of myself that really wants to go and play and is in awe and wonder. There also could be a reticent part that's just like, I don't know, there's too much going on. I need to step back a little. Just sort of recognizing what might be going on for you inside in preparation is really important. Because of this, what often the stressful conditions there that the weather brings, living in close proximity to people, much closer than we typically are in the default world, and as well, our normal roles that can give us support in the default world don't apply there. So if we have some of my self-worth is attached to my role as a therapist in the default world, that isn't going to mean anything when I'm there on the playa talking to people. So sometimes that can bring up some insecurity about self. It also can bring up some neediness if we are really struggling, and being needy is something that we've perhaps we have fought against. We became fiercely independent in our life earlier on, and all of a sudden we're finding that we're getting dehydrated. A storm is coming up. We're away from our camp. What do? We're feeling very needy. That can bring up a lot of discomfort. Feeling abandoned if our friends at our camp took off and we didn't know where they were going. We can feel abandoned. We can get jealous if we see that other people are having a much easier time at something. Sort of like getting in touch with some of our shadow side feelings that can come up, especially when we're feeling a little taxed, because we're exhausted, dehydrated, overstimulated. I have been a big fan of the Burning Man survival guides. There's relationship guides that are out there that relationship with camp members, or if you're going with a partner or a good friend, the normal rules don't apply there. Hey, we're going to meet at 6 o'clock and have dinner together. Who knows what's going to be going on then? You might run into somebody and you're on an art car, and next thing you know, it's way past sundown, and your partner might be waiting for you back at the camp and worried or irritated because you haven't shown up. These are things that are addressed in the relationship guide. So having some understanding that things don't always play out, and sort of drawing on that, the concept of immediacy, of being involved with what's happening right there in the moment and letting go of some of the shoulds that we might have. I should be back at camp. I should be meeting somebody at a particular time, and this being aware as well of the stories that we can create in our head, the narratives that we will make up if someone doesn't meet an expectation. That's the way that we can sabotage ourselves. So being aware of what our expectations are and talking about it, if possible, with the campmates or our partners or good friends that we're going to be going to the play on, I think is a really important part of preparation.
Yeah. This is kind of what Dan was saying about no plan survives contact with the playa. Uh, it strikes me that as we're having um, this conversation presupposes that people will go to Burning Man and be changed. And I wonder, uh, for the four of you who have done psychedelic assisted therapy work, which is generally either with psychedelic assisted therapy or with trauma integration therapy, it's my understanding that people are often coming to that experience with the intention that they want something to come out of that experience in therapy, whether it is in trauma integration therapy, uh, feeling better, so to speak, or have more understanding about an experience that has happened to them in the past, or with psychedelic assisted therapy of going through this uh, altered or perceptual experience with the intention of addressing something relatively specific. Has it been or what has been your experience, the four of you, with uh, having people come to an experience like that with the particular intention of, I want some kind of change or some kind of shift or something to happen through this particular experience? Or do people like come to a psychedelic assisted therapy instance with like, uh, well, we'll see what happens, and if nothing happens, then cool. What is that like? Yeah, Dr. Urigny, yes. Yeah. Oh, but you're on mute though. You have
Keep being
very
on
good,
mute.
like very good Zoom etiquette.
Thank you. So, I just want to say that Dan and I have actually worked together tremendously. Um, we've probably had 1,000 to 1,500 people under our care um, receiving training with ketamine practicums. We've seen a huge range of folks, unique and beautiful folks come in. And of course, I'm talking about the psychedelic context with deep respect that there is no endorsement that the playa is a place for psychedelics, right? It's up to individuals, but that's not an endorsement. But that's really had such a tremendous impact of simply seeing that much experience.
Mm.
And what, Dan can speak, as a very, very masterful guide himself and teacher. But when we would always address expectations with people, this is really, really important. And for one thing, you can turn in a particular direction versus have an address.
Mm.
When we have an address, we're deep into the default mode network. And that's the, oops, there's the cat food in the background. Sorry about that. That's the default world, right? It's named the default world for a reason. It's the default mode, it's the matrix. And when we come innocently with a particular address in mind that we're trying to get to, there's no flexibility, there's no openness or expansiveness. In fact, we can go even further. I would use a metaphor with people that we worked with of imagine, it's kind of funny, yes, the playa is beach. So let's imagine that there was once an ocean there, but that we're standing at that ocean and that the ocean is just moving gently up our ankles as the tide comes in. Perhaps we can be with intentions in that way. Another beautiful way of holding intention is that ultimately so many of our expansive experiences, there's a cat throwing up next to me here, to bring it all to real life, that so many of our experiences that are expansive and union are all about relationship. The depth of interconnection and relationship, that's the sacred space. And so we can come into, and I'm planning to do that. It's not even a plan, it's happening already at its own pace. The water is coming through, which is instead of here's the thing that I want for an intention, we can say, what's the relationship I'd like to have with myself at the playa? What's the relationship I'd like to have with life at the playa? And what's the relationship I would like to have with all the people there as the medicine that I have come to receive?
Mm.
So when we reframe in relationship and in kinship, something changes. There's a deep sense of belonging, and a disappointment doesn't undo us.
Mm.
Yeah, I think one question that, there's so much, I don't want people to overthink everything. There's so much to think about before the burn too, is like just logistics planning. But some of these questions, like I mentioned earlier, but I think this one is relevant too, at least asking it, what happens if you don't have the experience that you're hoping for at the burn?
Yeah.
And just like see what comes up. And yeah, what is your relationship to disappointment, like in life? Because it'll play out, maybe even amplified a little more after this. So those are a couple of inquiries that might be of value.
And I'd like to jump in here because, Dan, that was just right on point for me last year. In that, because of the dust storms and then the rainstorms that happened, I had become a Black Rock Ranger, and part of my desire to become a Black Rock Ranger is so that I'd be able to interact more with people in camps and have more contact. And what happened with the storms is that didn't happen, and I was more on my own than connecting. And so I sat with disappointment and worked through that there in recognizing what was possible. One door closed, there were other doors open, and being able to really appreciate what each moment held, while also holding space for some of the disappointment. So it's just really sitting with whatever it is that's coming up for you. And just to sort of tie things in, the number one, just back to the psychedelic assisted therapy, the number one reported negative outcome from psychedelics assisted therapy is disappointment, because they aren't getting what this intention was if they wanted. So I think just going on in slow and Rohini, I love the way that you framed that about the relationship with self and Playa, um, and really slowing down and looking at that before going in. It can be transformative, but I think that more often happens after, in what you do with the experience and the meaning you make out of your feelings and your experience and your thoughts from actually being present there.
Mhm.
Yeah, Jacob.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I actually don't do psychedelic assisted therapy and I don't endorse it. I do speak from a place of my own personal experience. I'm a recovering drug addict, so I have had over 150 to 200 psychedelic experiences during my active addiction. And since then, I actually didn't do integration well. Like getting dropped off in the middle of the Colorado woods because I wanted to live outside of society is not a good idea. Okay. Yeah, so I would highly recommend, like, for me personally, like when I would try to seek out these experiences constantly, and again, being met with what Dawn said, that constant disappointment. And if you're self-medicating and you're continuing to try to chase this thing, or you continue to be like, oh wow, I took too much, now I have to take these other drugs to counteract it. Now we're kind of in a danger zone. In a danger zone. So really like trying to like relinquish expectations because your answer might not come until after integration.
Mm.
So for me personally, like I could easily have like understood a lot of things after like maybe like 3 or 4 psychedelic experiences. And like if I had, like the therapy and I had like the people to talk to and I had like the support network and I used the tools that we were talking about here, Alan Watts had the great quote, if you have the message, you can hang up the phone. Like, and I do want to encourage that. So that's kind of like the place where I'm talking about, where it's like, hey, we definitely don't want to try to force experiences, force transformation. Like what we want to do inside of like, and I'm not a psychedelic assisted therapist, but in any type of therapy, we're introducing new things for new neural pathways to grow. And the cool thing about Burning Man is like there are so many new experiences there. The chances of neuroplasticity happening, the chances of building new neural pathways are so much greater that we reduce the like the trauma pathways from happening. We reduce the chances of like anxiety pathways from happening. All of a sudden like these new pathways open and we can have new experiences. But yeah, you can't have expectation because you're trying to force a neural pathway when 1,000 more could have opened up for you in this moment.
Mm. Mhm. The thread with what many of you have talked about just now has been about how do we address emotions and things that are coming up in the moment as we're experiencing. And so shifting towards how we might handle or address or embody the experience as it is happening. Jacob, I wonder if you might keep going for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like different doesn't mean dangerous. Okay. And uncomfortable isn't necessarily bad. And I just also want to just don't do drugs. Okay. Like I just want to say that out loud. But like, hey, if substances were had, if lack of sleep was had, if we're overheating, like all of these things are going to be really pushing down on us. And there's this thing of like trying to check out, where our brain disassociates. And when we're doing trauma therapy and our brain starts disassociating, we're not going to be able to reprocess. When we're in that we take a break. We want to be able to be fully present in order to build those new neural pathways. So checking in with yourself, like, hey, like, am I disassociating in this moment? Am I really in danger? And I'm okay with people disassociating if they're in real danger. If I'm being attacked by a shark in the middle of the ocean, I'm totally okay with my brain disassociating and waking up like 3 days later. Okay. I'm okay with that. And if you're in a dangerous situation and like, you're being treated unfairly and that's really happening, that's an actual valid coping mechanism. Okay. However, we don't want to do it because it's not good for the brain on a consistent basis. Okay. And if we want to grow and we want to be able to be present, we have to be present. We have to allow ourselves to experience what we're experiencing and leading with curiosity.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Rahi, you had mentioned earlier about bringing things back into the body,
Yeah.
and being fully present is often really aided by an attunement to what's going on in our body as opposed to how we're thinking about something.
Yeah. Now I was thinking about this metaphor. Again, this image came into my head. I love metaphors. And that so much happens, and in, thinking about my tent on the playa, right? I come in with all of these ideas and I'm moving around. And if I leave those ideas outside where the wind and the sand can blow them around, they don't get integrated, versus I bring them inside the tent as a metaphor of my body and I land them there, then I can come and get them there later.
Mm.
So my Ayurvedic teacher, because I studied some Ayurveda, I'm not an Ayurvedic physician, but it's I synthesize it with neuroscience and with everything else. So my Ayurvedic teacher said something really profound to me. He said, when the body is at rest, the mind is calm and alert. And within a calm and alert mind, one can see divinity within oneself and all others. So there's a way that the bottom-up approach, rather than the mind, which is rapid, right? You think you've put something together and it flies away in the wind when it's not in the body. And you know how you feel when you get up first thing in the morning, right? You feel fresher, or you've taken an afternoon nap, whatever, you've spent time in nature, all of these things that are deeply restful. We had a beautiful conversation with your sister, and you're in your heart center. The body is calm. What happens, this is a tiny example, and I've been teaching my students, some of my students this, which is when we don't tend to the body, let's take fatigue. When we don't tend to fatigue, what happens in fatigue is that the brain interprets fatigue as a threat.
Mm.
And so many of you watching, whether now or YouTube, later, you're familiar with a threat response, right? This is the amygdala in the brain trying to analyze and trying to hone the brain towards what's wrong. Oh my gosh, what's going wrong is because there's something really inadequate about me. Then there's shame and disappointment, distrust and paranoia and fear, and all of that start to spin around, and you start to think, it's me, there's something really wrong with me. And whereas if that grandmother energy was with you, she'd say, there, sweetie, just lay down with a glass of milk for an hour. Feel better. And the threat response decreases, and you wake up from that, and you're no longer having all of those thoughts. It's honestly as simple as that. Now, one of the things, and I won't monopolize this time, but this is so important to come back to the body. Ayurveda says that the main definition of health is not blood pressure or heart rate, although those are really important from a medical perspective. I won't let that go. Or conditions. It's the capacity when we're feeling safe and rested in the body to adapt to what's showing up in front of us, right? What's showing up in front of me or beside me is that the other cat came and started to lick the throw up. Now, I had to go, I wish I hadn't seen that. But if I'm rested, I can laugh about it, right? Or I say something goofy here in a state of spaciousness, I can just laugh at myself. It doesn't turn into something else. Now, when we are beyond our capacity to adapt and to be flexible with what's going on, that's the beginning of both physical illness and the thing that we call psychological trauma, something that overwhelms our capacity to adapt. And the antidotes to this trauma are actually attachment and attunement. And where does attachment start? Yes, it's in relationship and kinship, but it's also a wild, compassionate kinship with self. I'll stop there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dawn, jump in about connection with others and the self.
Um, yes. When you're there on the playa and connecting with others and while connecting with self, there can be an openness and a vulnerability that comes up, and a feeling of connection. And especially if there are any weather events that lead to you having to hunker down with other people and you're going through a challenging experience together, it really nurtures a form of a feeling of connection. And that's one of the beauties, one of the beautiful gifts that is available on the playa. But it's also important to remember that, and when we're there in that environment, then some of our defenses can start to, our ego function, the protection mechanisms that we have in the default world, can start to fade away. And we can be there more open and engaging almost in that childlike wonder with everything that's going on right there. But what also can happen is when our defenses are being dropped, then that also can put us more at risk of old trauma getting activated, old wounds that we haven't fully processed. Or even if we have processed and worked on them and aware of them, there can be a constellation of circumstances that happen. So, and as well, because we're dropping our old roles that we have in the default world, it can make us more vulnerable. And so, again, going back to what we talked about, and Dan was talking a lot about that, in being aware of what might come up for you, I think it's important to recognize what are the stories we tell ourselves, what do we fill in the voids with, because that says something about our previous experience and what might get activated if we're feeling insecure, disconnected. And, when there is old trauma that's getting activated or old core wounds that's getting activated, that often sets the stage for insecurity and shame, body image issues, the stuff that we have struggled with at other areas, at other times in our life, can come flooding to the surface. So just being aware of it and then reminding ourselves that we're okay, that we've been through this before, noticing what we need. Something that I often say to first-time burners is there is an opportunity, or even a tendency to come face to face with our limits and our edges. How much exhaustion is too much? How much stimulation is too much? So really noticing, again, what's going on in our body, and when we might be starting to get a little too overwhelmed, when we need to take a step back, when we need to connect with our body, do some breath work, some body scans to check in, to notice, do we need to move away from the stimulation so we can catch our breath, or are we putting up a wall? We want to move forward, but there's some old belief that we have that says it isn't safe. So it's just really getting a lot of clarity with what's going on inside, and that reconnecting with self continually.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan, you've talked about something similar, in terms of like, what can we say to ourselves in the moment to help us stay present, as we're feeling something?
Yes, it might be worthwhile to come up with a personal mantra ahead of time to think about something that's meaningful for you, that can help you remember where you are in that present moment. It could be such as I am safe. That is, if you are safe and you're just spinning out emotionally and intellectually. It could be another safe word or phrase that you have. You could also focus on the physical surroundings and naming them, for example. It's like, okay, that's a bicycle. Okay, those are shoes. It's just kind of help a way to bring a present moment. And there's also this other one. I don't know exactly what this is, but I read about it and I've done it a few times when I've been like tired in a meeting. So and maybe a pressure point or something, but like holding like right in between here, a thumb and a finger. I don't know if anyone on this call knows anything about this, but it's pretty sensitive. So it's kind of a gentle kind of pressure on there. It's like, okay, oh, I'm alive, I'm awake here, and it's brings me into a moment, and into the present moment. And then, I mean, and maybe something is you're really overstimulated and you can't stay present, and you do need to focus on a happy place or something, so you can come back to the present moment. Just some different ideas for everyone.
Yeah, thanks. And I think this really brings us to Rainey, what you were talking about earlier about coming back into the body and being present in these experiences and coming back into the body is also really important, not just when we're overwhelmed and overstimulated and stressed, but also when we really want to enjoy the moment that we have, if we're experiencing a moment of joy or euphoria. Uh, Tell us a little bit more about um, what we can do in our body in terms of slowing down and some of those techniques.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, you mentioned joy and euphoria, so I'm just going to go there for a moment. Tending, which is one of my most favorite words, is is bringing in what supports and nourishes us and really staying there with it. I start all my meditations for myself and my students with, I'm slowing and softening into awareness. And even just sitting for 90 seconds, we can do micro practices. A tiniest micro practice, I don't go anywhere, any meeting without warm liquid, even when it's warm, but I'm weird and I'm Indian. So even as I took a sip of my Egyptian licorice tea, which is coating my esophagus and my stomach, all the mucous membranes are being lined in a beautiful way with this herb, licorice. Same thing with, and that, in fact, an herb like licorice or fennel that you could take around with you, and slippery elm is one that is mucousy in the mouth. Anything that causes us to feel kind of connected, sweet, hydrated, and present. So all of those little micro practices can bring us. So here's something really sweet. We tend to hang on to neutral or joyful experiences like it's Teflon. We're just sliding on through. Some of us might have a bias that the harder it is for us, the better we've done, you know, go big or go home kind of a thing. And Rick Hansen, and whereas we might stick to experiences that are really difficult for us mentally, like Velcro. And this is well known in neuroscience for a really long time. Rick Hansen wrote this very, very beautiful book. He's a neuropsychologist who said, listen, and we've hinted around neuroplasticity here. We haven't named it, right? But this is what's going on. When Dawn, you said, when we come back and we change what we're doing based on what happens, that's when we change. That's the neuroplastic change. The brain opens up, allowing us to make changes, and then we make them, and then they stick. But what causes that opening? What starts to change us towards a sense of well-being? So Rick Hansen says, any tiny experience of delight that you have, stop and register it, all the details of it. Wow, after that, hot ass sun, that little bit of breeze felt so good. Register that for 20 to 30 seconds. You do this here, now, at the playa, and afterwards. 20 to 30 seconds. What does that cost? A few times, like a couple times a day, a few times over the course of the week. Your brain's already started to change towards well-being, right? This is where, when there is spaciousness, it supports our body, us to take care of our bodies, and then we start to see divinity within all experiences. I mean, like I have this little snail shell, and it's got one of the oldest symbols in any culture, which is a spiral. And that spiral literally represents that which we are becoming or that which we are returning to. And so, keep a symbol in addition to Dan's beautiful question, and I'm here, I'm safe, to a symbol or a drawing with you. What's unfolding here? And what can I register? So I just, you said joyful. I had to say that, but really, we don't have to get all technical with yoga. And Jake, you mentioned this, at the very beginning. All of these different practices, yoga, tapping, breath work, we don't have to be experts in them. We just need to know that one tiny little thing. For instance, a practice of inhaling out to everything and then exhaling back to heart center. And maybe there's a little gap between the inhale and the exhale where we drop in tiny micro practice. I love micro practices of coming through because it's hard in a place where we're being really stimulated to go, I'm going to stop for an hour and meditate. No, but we're multidimensional beings. We are. And so multiple things can be going on at the same time. We can be nourishing and taking care of ourselves, even while being amazingly present and peaceful and adaptive to what's going on.
I love that. I wonder if maybe all of us here in the meeting could like focus together for just a moment and take a big deep breath all in together, like big in, and then let it out.
And when we make the exhale longer than the inhale, and most people already know this, what we're doing is that we're activating the parasympathetic system. It's the system within us that allows our mind to get sharper, that turns down the blood pressure and the heart rate and increases digestion in the gut. It's amazing. All we have to do, maybe breathe in for 4 and breathe out to a count of 7. And keep remembering my voice with you as you do that anywhere, because we all need that kind of crone voice with us.
Well, we've all taken this time tonight to gather to think about what is it that we're doing, and maybe not necessarily how can we get the most out of this experience, but how can we prepare in other ways besides just the usual preparation that we do for Burning Man, which is, planning and packing and traveling ourselves there, but also taking some time to be thoughtful and intentional about planning and preparing for what else might come besides just, do I have all my totes and do I have all my ratchet straps? Um, and I think something that we all have talked about is that it's not necessarily just only planning and preparing for the moment while we're there. But the theme of one of our first section was also, how do we plan and prepare for what comes after Exodus as an important part of the overall experience? And Dan, I know you have a really fun ritual for after the playa.
If at all possible, if time and resources allow for folks, highly recommended if you can find some hot springs and decompress a little bit and just unplug and settle in a little bit before you head back into the default world. That's one of the main ones, if possible. I have some other ideas, but I can let others share.
Yeah, like getting that like the physical sensations of being in water that feels different and being in water after being in this place that is so dry and dusty just feels so nourishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another one I'll just name is there are some of the practices that have been mentioned, such as yoga and Tai Chi and meditation. If anyone's heard of it's called forest bathing, and it's not hot springs bathing in the forest, although that's awesome as we just discussed. This is more about bathing. Shinrin yoku, I think, is the original term in Japanese, I believe, and it's bathing in nature through all the five senses. So what are you smelling as you walk through nature? Pick up a rock. Do you feel the wind on your face? That could be another mindful practice of just being present as you're back in the default world.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. There's something about like taking the time to decompress over your travel time and um using that time as you're in transition from the playa to your life in the default world as a way of also transiting or transitioning through a mental state from being at Burning Man to then being back in the default world. Um, Dawn, what about our interpersonal decompression and reconnecting with others when we physically return?
Yeah, that's a good point because often we are very open. Our defenses have sort of fallen to the side, and we can be feeling quite vulnerable. And those protection mechanisms or ego defenses that we develop for a reason.
Mm.
And it's important to recognize as you are reintegrating back into the default world that you might feel a little raw and a little vulnerable. And so it's important to be very mindful about what you're doing right after, who you are choosing to share your experience with. I know that was talked about a little bit in the beginning as well, but choose wisely um, about who you're going to talk to about it. If someone has never been before, there's a good chance they may not be able to fully understand how important experience was to you, and they could be a little dismissive or judgmental, which you're going to feel quite deeply when you're coming back, and there's so much that you want to share. So um, recognizing that you might need to intentionally bring back some of those protection mechanisms that you have, going really slow as well, and also leaving as much space as is possible after coming back so that you have a chance to more slowly transition and to replay
Mm.
um, the events in your head, the experiences, the little pieces and the big pieces, especially the joyful pieces. I'm a big fan of absolutely taking them in, but also carving out time after to replay those moments where you felt touched or seen or some giggly delight, just something to sort of reinforce that. Because as you were saying, um, that the Velcro for anything negative and the positive has more, it's more likely to kind of slip away. So to really, really anchor those in, but it's important to recognize you're going to be coming back in somewhat in a vulnerable state. So just be very mindful, wrap yourself in cotton batton, whatever that means to you in your life, and be very mindful about the environments and the dynamics that you're putting yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jacob, you've talked about the importance of taking care of yourself physically when you return as well, in making some time for yourself when you come back.
Specifically around sleep. It can be really stimulating being a Burning Man, and I don't think a lot of us might not have a problem getting home and like being able to like get back into that circadian rhythm and sleeping really deeply. But something I really want to be like self-aware of is what if you come back from the playa and you might be a little manic? Maybe you feel like that you don't need any sleep at all and you're ready to take on the world. Okay. In that moment, you really need sleep. Okay. So just like I can't I can't overemphasize the importance of sleeping as a way to integrate your experience.
Yeah. If I could add on to that, before the playa, during the playa, after the playa, I always think about the high five, the most important functions of our body. This one, the opposable thumb, that's not any, we've got this. This is sleep. We cannot do without the thumb, right? We cannot do without it. And even if you're not being able to sleep, even just laying down horizontally and being silent and resting is sometimes good enough. And then do all the things you need to do to really sleep. I do have a friend in the hospital right now with a manic episode, and the energy is really intense. And this is one of the things that happens, but it's from going and going and going and going, right? This is a real danger. I'm glad that you mentioned it. And even the tiny hypomanic state, let's just really dial it down. The second one is to start hydration here before going, right? You know that anytime you're about to go on a big adventure or you're about to play soccer in the heat, hydrate beforehand. Really get the body used to that sensation of being hydrated. What does my pee look like? What's my heart rate when I'm hydrated? And the third thing is digestion. Digestion might get really messed up when you're not eating the things that you're used to eating. So it's not about what you're eating as much as starting to notice already now, then, and afterwards, how does it make me feel after I eat it, and make some wise choices around that. Sometimes food is just food and we do the best we can. The fourth thing that's incredibly important is elimination, right? All kinds of elimination, the peeing, the sweating, the pooping in particular. And to notice, because when we're constipated, we feel anxious and weird, right? As I said, conditions of the body make the mind a little crazy. And the fifth thing is, I've talked about a capacity to play and to be flexible happens when all of these other things are actually being met.
Lovely. Other things from you all in terms of preparing for coming back. And I know that we're going to carry a lot of this in our second part as well. Just want to see if there's anything lasting out there from you all before we turn to our questions from participants. Yeah, let's Epiphany. You have been moderating our chat. Thank you so much. What questions are out there for our participants?
We have had some comments and talk in the chat. I have one question for me, and the other questions I think you have met while you were talking tonight. So I do have one comment before I ask it though, just about prep. While you were talking about mental health, I recall one of the biggest difficulties I hear from the mental health practitioners on Playa is taking medication regularly and on time, because we all are off our regular rhythms and rituals, and often aren't using our phone or whatever way we normally remember to take our medications. So building that in or preparing for that in some way, and how also having like a backup and someone who knows maybe if you are taking medication could be really helpful. I don't know if anyone on your panel has other ideas about that. Please feel free to say, maybe Jacob.
Yeah, I definitely would recommend always have it on your person. Like it doesn't have to be the full bottle, but just like having that they sell these really nice little like tiny pill pouches, and you can put a label on it. It's like, I'm supposed to have this. This is Saturday, 8:30 p.m., and having some backup ones at the camp. But when you leave camp and you're not going to anticipate coming back. Like I hope you get back before your med time at 4:30, but the chances are really low. So just have that on your person.
Great.
Okay. So my question was for Rohini, actually. My mother was a career hospice nurse. And I was wondering if there are things that you normally teach people to prepare for a death, either their own or a loved one's, that could also help us prepare for a burn.
Wow. That's a really beautiful question. Let me take a moment. I don't know this because, as I said, I'm the comic relief here who hasn't been to any burns, but I'm anticipating that there is a tremendous amount of releasing something in that experience. And that sometimes that comes with joy and relief, and at other times it comes with loss. And this is where the questions I think that Dan had offered at the very beginning are really profound for preparation. What's my relationship with loss? We've talked about disappointment, and disappointment is a form of loss. And, when I was pregnant, and my midwife used to say, all birds are chickens. And I think all feelings are grief. And that we can prepare for it by not bypassing it. And that the way that we do that here and there is to learn what it means to really slow down and soften. Slowing in itself creates a lot of discomfort when our modalities have been to do a lot of sports and a lot of movement in order to maybe bypass innocently some of the discomfort of feeling. It is very possible, I can talk about a psychedelic context, but anything in which the consciousness is expanded is very likely to amplify the feelings that are already there. And so softening, even if slowing isn't easy, what does it feel like when I say the word soften? What does it feel like when I say tend? What does it feel like when I say melt? And to work with this in anticipation of things that are simply shifting all the time. And you can ask yourself, what is unfolding here? I'm not preparing you to actually die on the playa, because we don't want anybody to die on the playa. Everything that we're saying is to prevent an actual death. Some experiences, including psychedelic experiences or other experiences of being caught somewhere at night, being cold, might feel like death. And rely on relationships, because what I know from being a hospice doc is those families, those patients and people that are most at peace are those who are most well connected. In fact, the Harvard study found that, you can see it on TED Talk. What are the determinants of a healthy, happy, fulfilled life? It's relationships. And it's exactly the same at the end. There's this incredible book that I would recommend to anybody that I've been reading recently. I've actually been listening to it because it's a delight to listen to it. And I think it would really support anyone coming to the playa or to these kinds of experiences because they are non-linear. They're the expect the unexpected, which happens at the end of life. It's called Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta, and he's the first Aboriginal scholar to ever represent the Aboriginal ways. And it came incredibly close to describing psychedelic experiences because the whole thought is the living in kinship and in patterns of kinship, which is exactly what we're going to experience, including the kinship with self and all of the patterns of relationships internally. I don't know if I answered that beautiful question directly. There's just so much more to say, but maybe that's just the first pass.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that was great. I'm really looking forward to hearing from everyone here when we come back in the fall, and especially you, your pre and your post experience from after your burn. Yeah, so thank you. And then Vesper, I guess we had some, you guys were talking in the room about that things could get difficult on Playa. And so I did in the chat post our resource list from our last talk about harm reduction. And so I just say, if you're watching this on video, you could find those resources on Hive or in the camp resource guide on the Burning Man website. And we were also just touching on how difficult it could be to sleep on Playa, and Burning Man does have a great sound policy that comes with strategies for how to manage your own sound output in your camp to help be a good neighbor. You can find that on the Burning Man website as well.
Yeah. And just in case if people are looking for that most recent campfire talk before this, that would be season 6, episode 4,
Yeah.
about harm reduction, which is an excellent deep dive into how do we keep things from going wrong in all kinds of ways? And if things are starting to go wrong, how can we intervene in a way that is not an extreme reaction? We had representatives from Zendo, from the Rangers, from ESD, and it was a great conversation about what we can individually do, as well as what resources are available in terms of harm reduction on the playa that might not be calling a law enforcement officer or going to the hospital or something like that. Yeah. Awesome. I'm so excited to have had this conversation with you all, and I really appreciate your expertise and your care and your thoughtful sharing with us to help us prepare for the burn that we're going to have. And Rohini, you're only just not a burner yet. That time is coming very soon for you, and it'll be amazing to hear your perspective about this on the other side. So I encourage all of our participants who are here to join us again after the burn to talk about how do we make meaning from this thing that we just did, and particularly in how do we understand and bring into ourselves an experience that was challenging. Even if we don't have extreme weather on the playa, it is a harsh environment to exist in. And it seems as though in recent years, we have had some even more challenging experiences to get through. But also, there are times at Black Rock City where things are amazing. And in the interactions we have with each other, the interactions that we have with the art, and the interactions that we have with the environment, how do we take those amazing, awesome euphoric experiences and bring them into who we're going to be when we're not at Burning Man. So thank you all for being here tonight. If you would please fill out our feedback form about this talk, share ideas for future sessions. And if participating in something like this seems interesting to you, we are looking for new volunteers on our team with new ideas for what we can talk about to bring burners together in the future, and also to do the work of bringing us all together in spaces like this. Thank you very much to our panelists tonight for being here. Thank you for sharing yourselves with us. And I can't wait to see you all in the dust in just a few short months.
Do we want to hum together?
Yes, please.
Okay.
As
All
we
right.
are all getting ready to go out into the world tonight.
Yeah, let's hum. So there's something amazing that actually happens neurologically when we hum. All of our body can vibrate and we can feel that life energy everywhere, and it's really amazing. Turns out it also releases nitrous oxide in the brain, in the nose, which allows deeper breath and all kinds of good things. So feel free, if you want to unmute yourself and we can hum together. So we're just going to hum 3 times. Deep breath in. Our fingers tingling. And last one. A beautiful opportunity to bring yourself back into your body, humming anytime.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care and good night.